So in that last one, we calculated it to where we have a total and it has more digits than it needs, and the actual number itself might not be accurate. So let's actually take a look at that. If we look at the code here in our models, we see that getting final amount, we used all these float numbers. Now floats are not as accurate as using something other than that. So let's actually take a look at that. And we will go ahead and jump into the Python shell. We don't have to go in the Django Python shell. We can just type out Python. And then if I do 10 or 12.0 plus 10.12, we get a strange number. It's close to being correct, but it's not correct. So what we have to do is use a built-in function from Python. So it's from decimal, import capital decimal. And now what we could do is use the decimal function and then put the number itself into a string plus decimal and then 10.12, and now we get the right answer. Now of course if I did decimal and then used a float number here, it's not going to work correctly. It will give us still some weird number. So you definitely want to make sure that you put quotes in there. And this is how we are going to actually use it in the sense that actually creating our decimal places correctly and also having the right math come through on our function. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to exit out of this, just clear it and run the server again. Okay, so now into our code, we want to import this. So from decimal, import decimal. All right, now down here, instead of float, we're going to use decimal. And then we're going to convert our text into a string and then use that as decimal as well. Save that. And then we will come back in here and do a refresh, and we still have a number that has 4 digits. So we want to change the amount of digits that it has, and that 4 digits is happening right here. So how that's being multiplied, it's giving us 4 decimal places, which we only want 2. So now I'm going to make just a little way to do it, and it's fairly simple. First off, I'm going to declare what 2 decimal places are, and that's 2 places equals to decimal, and use 10, the actual number, and then we do the negative exponent of 2. And now that we have that, we can convert this whole thing into the actual correct one. So we do decimal and then put it all into a decimal, so both of these into a decimal, and then we want to quantize 2 places. Quantize 2 places there. And now we've got 32.39 being our total. And so that should work. So now if we go into a product and we add to cart, we have 59.98. And then after with taxes and stuff, we have 64.78, which is good. So that is how we are actually going to calculate the correct amount. And this 2 places here just gives us a number that is, so if I print 2 places, and I did a refresh there, it shows me 0.001. And all that's doing is moving that over to 2 places, and that's exactly what that's doing. And calculating the actual order total is fairly straightforward now. So this is where we're going to have to think about, okay, do we want to have this function still be here in the instance method? I think it's probably a good idea, because then no matter where we are, we can always update what the order price or total was. And then this is also where we might want to put discounts and stuff like that. I'm not going to do that quite yet as far as discounting and stuff like that. That might be something we add in the future. But for now, this is adding the total as we'd like. And then as far as tax total, perhaps we put our own default here, or I mean tax percentage, excuse me. So we would put our own default here to actually have some sort of tax percentage. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to put it in the settings module. So inside of settings, and I'm going to scroll down, and I'll put it right under marketing, and I'll say default tax rate and 0.08, so that's 8%. Okay, so that's our default tax rate now. So inside of our models, we want to import this. So try tax rate equals to settings.default tax rate. And of course, that's settings right there. And we're going to do that same implementation error that we did on the view here. So I can just go ahead and copy that and go back into models, paste that down. So that will give us the implementation error, of course. And now down here, this will happen no matter what if it's not implemented right off the bat. So now this decimal, we want to use it as the tax rate here. So I'm just going to put the tax rate right in there. And the problem with how I currently have it is it's not actually a string. So I'm going to convert it into a string by doing that. There we go. So we've got our tax rate here. So I can actually cut this and say tax rate as decimal. That way we're not getting too complicated here. And then we want to do subtotal as decimal. Just so it's a little bit easier for us to read. So now that we've got that, we have our two decimals working, and self.subtotal is okay. So we actually don't need this whole line right here because we have it right here. So I'm just going to grab this and put that here. So now everything's looking good, and then we have our tax total here. So tax total is going to be what this whole thing is. If I just cut this and say tax total decimal, then we've got that. So I can just do this, oops, paste that there, and then paste this here. Right, so that's how it's still adding the same stuff. So if we save it and refresh in our checkout, let's make sure our server is running. Settings has no default tax rate. I did a little refresh there. All right, so there's our current total. And we can do some math real quick. So I'm going to open up our calculator. And let's look at our cart. So 59.98, oops, not 95, 59.98 times 0.08 equals to that, and then we add plus 59.98, we get 64 which would be 78. Go in here, 64.78. There we go. So now it's actually working correctly, and it's kind of weird on how that actually works, but the purpose of it is to make sure that we're definitely accurate as far as how the decimal places are going to work and all that. And this little function right here will convert that stuff for us. Now we could also do it where we maybe actually use this as its own function. So that might be something we think about too, and put it into like our settings utility where it calculates a sum based on certain number of, you know, decimal places that we put in there, or decimal fields or decimal numbers that we put in there. But for now, this is great. This works. It gets us our final amount, and it does it fairly painlessly. So when we go into our cart, this of course is going to add the correct amount, right? Because these are decimal places. So when you add decimal fields together, it will definitely get the correct amount. It's just when you start to multiply new numbers, which in our case was multiplying that tax rate, that's when you'll start getting some errors and unexpected numbers here. And then once those unexpected numbers are flushed out, then we just make it into 2 decimal places, which is perfect. So now that we have this, it's going to be a lot easier to have accurate charges for whatever it is that we're working on, whether it's shipping or other types of rates. Like, so if you wanted 25% off, something like that, that would be another thing that would factor into how this decimal place stuff works. All right, so let me know if you have any questions on this. Otherwise, let's keep going.